This video is going to show you a few things about intervals as applied to the keyboard. So remember that an interval is the distance between two notes. This could be two written notes or two notes on your instrument, but the distance between them. And an interval has two parts to it. So there's the number of letters that the interval spans, and then there's also the number of half steps that it takes to get from one note to the other note in your interval. So what we're going to see here today is, first of all, we're going to look at the intervals in a major scale so that you're familiar with that as a basis, and then we're going to focus more on the half step part of it after that. So let's take one of our major scales and we'll start there. We'll take C major, and C major is all natural notes. So let's investigate the intervals that can be found from going from the tonic note or starting note in C major to any other note in the scale. What you're going to find as we go through this is that there are only two types of intervals present. There's either major intervals or perfect intervals. So starting with C and going to the second note of the scale, D, that's what we call a major second. It's two half steps apart. From C going to the next note, which is E, that's a major third, 4 half steps apart. C going up to F is a perfect fourth, that's 5 half steps apart. Then C to G, which is the next note of the scale, that's what we call a perfect fifth. It's 7 half steps apart. A major sixth is next, going from C up to A. That's 9 half steps apart. C up to B is 11 half steps. That's a major seventh. And then C up to C is a full octave, and that would be 12 half steps apart. We call it a perfect octave. So all of these intervals contained within the notes of a major scale are either major or perfect. Major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and perfect octave. So when we're talking about the number, like a second, a third, a fifth, that has to do with the number of letters that an interval spans. So for example, from the bottom of C major, C, up to the fifth note, G, we would call that a fifth because as we look at it on the keyboard, there's 5 letters involved from bottom to top or top to bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. C, D, E, F, G. So it's a span of 5 letters, which makes it a fifth. If I go from C up to B, that's a span of 7 letters. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. 7 different ones. So we'd call it a seventh. So that's one part of the interval, and that's maybe the most basic part. But then we have to figure out what type of interval it is, not just the number. So when we're describing it as major or minor or perfect or other intervals like augmented or diminished, it has to do with how many half steps it takes to move from one of the notes to the other. And it shouldn't matter if you're moving up or you're moving down. It should still count the same. So when we were looking at the number of the interval, say C to G, and we said that was a fifth, we counted the starting note and the ending note and any other letters involved. Now if I want to figure out what type of fifth this is, then I find my starting note. Let's say we start with C, and from there I don't start counting until I actually step, because we're counting steps, half steps. So from C, it takes me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 half steps to get up to G. And as you've seen in the summary of common intervals, going from C to G, if it's 7 half steps, would be what we call a perfect fifth. Now I could find my half steps, count my half steps, and say that it adds up to a perfect fifth, but then I probably just want to double check it before I label it as a perfect fifth. And I want to look again at the letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters. Okay, that makes sense. Now I know that it's not only a perfect fifth according to the half steps, but when I look at it visually, or if it was on the staff, it would be the same concept. I would count the letters and find out that there's 5 of them, so that matches up. Nothing's conflicting with each other. Let's try a couple more examples just to give you the hang of actually counting the half steps themselves. This time we're going to go down. So we'll start with A, and we're going to go down to F sharp. As we go down, we start with A, and we're going to count half steps. 1, 2, 3 half steps will put us on F sharp. So from A to F sharp, that's 3 half steps apart. We could go to our interval chart and we could see that that is a minor third. Now I'm going to double check it. It was A to F sharp. So let's see how many letters are involved. A, G, and then the F sharp. That's an F. So we have 3 letters, and that would match up with the idea that that interval is a minor third. So not only does it have the right number of half steps, but it also spans the right number of letters to make it a third. Let's try one more. We'll make this a larger one. So let's start on G sharp, and we're going to go up to E. And again, I could count going up or down. It should give me the same result. But from G sharp to E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 half steps would give me, according to our interval chart that you have online, would give you a minor sixth. So now I'm going to count the letters, make sure that it actually looks like a sixth. G, A, B, C, D, E. That's 6 letters, so that seems to match up well with the idea of it being a sixth interval. Now, going back to our scale again for a moment, we started out with that C major scale. And if you are very familiar with scales, if you have a lot of knowledge about them and what the key signatures are, or you can figure that out quickly, then that could give you some hints for being able to find out what type of interval the distance between 2 notes would be. So for example, let's say the interval that I gave you went from C up to A. If you know the C major scale, you would know that A is the 6th note of the scale, and a major scale only has major or perfect intervals, so a 6th would be a major 6 in that case. There's no such thing as a perfect 6, as you know, so we would call this a major 6. If it was C to F, we would call it a perfect 4th. You would know F is the 4th note of a C major scale. I can relate it to that, and then I can describe it as a perfect 4th. The way that this is not as helpful would be if you're not as familiar with scales. So you might want to use that method more if you already have some scale background. But regardless of what your level of background is, you can always count the half steps between one note and the other, and then look at the letters to make sure that the number matches up, such as a 6th or a 2nd or a 4th.